Hi, so sorry for any mistakes and stuff. I'm in a bit of a hurry, but I'll try to explain the situation to the best of my abilities. So I, 27, female, had a baby with my husband Nate, 28, male, last week. We dated for 3 years and got married 2 years back. I've known his family for the past 5 years, and since my parents live out of state and my dad has a lot of health problems, they were the ones supposed to drive me to the hospital when I went into labor if my husband was not around. We had already discussed it. They had agreed to it, and given my relationship with them, I had no reason to think that they wouldn't show up. We've had a fairly normal relationship, but I don't know what happened. Last week, when I went into labor, my husband was unavailable. It was about 3 weeks before my due date, so in all fairness, I don't blame him because we were not expecting it. When my water broke, I started trying to call him, but unfortunately, it just went straight to voicemail. Later on, he told me he was in a very important client meeting and the location had really poor reception. But anyway, we had planned for this, so the next thing that I did was call my in-laws when I realized that he was probably not going to be able to pick up my calls anytime soon. When I called them, they didn't pick up either the first few times, but I just kept calling until my mother-in-law finally answered the phone. She sounded really annoyed, but I told her about my situation and said that I wanted to start heading to the hospital now. But instead of telling me that they would be here, they told me that I needed to wait until the contractions were fewer seconds apart, and then they would show up. And right now, they were busy because they were meeting my sister-in-law's boyfriend for the first time, and they couldn't just get up and leave. For context, my sister-in-law, Lily, 23, female, has only been with this guy for 6 months. And I'm sure that they could have lunch with him later on as well. And forgive me if I'm sounding arrogant, but I'm pretty sure that me going into labor was a bigger deal than meeting him. I tried to tell them that I didn't want to wait, but they told me that it was fine. The baby could wait, and they just needed to finish this lunch, and then they would be here. At the time, they had literally just placed their order, so it was obviously going to take a much longer time for them to get their food, finish it, and then drive to my house. Add to that the time that it would take for them to drive me from my house to the hospital. I did the math, and I realized that I just couldn't afford to count on them, so I tried to call my husband a few more times. But when he didn't respond, I decided to just drive myself to the hospital instead. The contractions were still bearable, so somehow I was able to make it in time before it got worse. Once I was there, all checked in, I just waited for anyone to call me back, and about 2 hours later, my husband finally did call me back. I told him everything, including the bit about my in-laws refusing to show up, and he told me that he would be there. Within another 2 hours, he was by my side, and by then, I was properly in labor, so I had no time to think about my in-laws or anyone else. I had the baby several hours later, and we were too happy to discuss anything about his parents. My in-laws, by the way, never ended up showing up anyway. They called my husband up 2 days later asking if everything had gone well with the delivery, making excuses about how they had forgotten because they were just so caught up with lunch. I don't understand how anybody can even just forget about the birth of their grandchild, but whatever. Nate had been waiting for that phone call, and when they called, they really had it from him. He told him that they were irresponsible and self-centered and said that he had never expected them to do something like this. But now that it had happened, they could say goodbye to any chances of having a relationship with their grandchild. Because now the only grandkid they'd have anything to do with was Lily's baby. Whenever she had a kid, and that's definitely not happening in a while. Then he blocked them, and literally just a few minutes later, I started receiving a bunch of texts from my in-laws and Lily saying that I shouldn't have snitched for no reason. They're saying that I've overreacted and that this really wasn't a big deal because ultimately nothing really happened. So I replied to them, telling them that that's not the point at all. The point was that they had committed to something. And at the very last minute, they totally disappointed me by not showing up. And even after that, they didn't even have the common courtesy to apologize and were pretending as if this was all fine. Besides, this was serious. This involved the birth of my child, and I was not going to forgive them for this. I told him that my husband had said exactly what I felt, and they really don't deserve to be around their grandkid if they don't respect their grandkid's mom. But they're still insisting that we are overreacting, and even though I don't agree, I just wanted to make sure that we are in the right here. So, hey ITA for not allowing my in-laws to see their grandchild after they refused to help me. Update 1. Thanks for all the comments. It means a great deal to me. Nate and I had a chat about whatever we were told, and we decided that we were just going to stick to whatever we had decided. They don't deserve to be around my baby, period. When they needed to help me out, they turned their backs on me. They can't seriously expect me to forget about that so soon, especially considering the fact that they haven't even apologized or shown me that they are sorry for what they did. So how do I even forgive people who are not even sorry? I can't. And very frankly speaking, I don't even want to. I had already been 80% convinced that we were not in the wrong here. But after reading the comments, I realized just how wrong they were for doing what they did. Now that I think about it, I can't even wrap my head around how they could be so heartless. It wasn't even like we had ever had a bad relationship, so I don't know where this came from. Even Nate is quite confused. We don't know why this happened, but the bottom line is that it did happen. I blocked them all as well, and now they don't have any way to get through to us. It's a good thing because both of us are very busy with our child at the moment. Newborns can really be a handful. And honestly, we don't have the time for this sort of drama. It's meaningless. It's not going to lead to anything. And so we don't want to engage in it. If you want to keep trying to get in touch with us and keep guilt tripping us, they are completely welcome to do that. But they are seriously delusional if they expect us to respond to them at any point. So far, they haven't tried again. But then again, it's just been a couple of days since we blocked them. So I'm pretty sure that if you just give it some time, they're going to try harder, because I know that they are all very keen on keeping the family together. So they won't be able to stand it if we end up cutting them off permanently. But that's what's happening. And whether they can accept that or not, it's really none of our concern. I thought that Nate was going to be a lot more disappointed that his parents are not going to be a part of our lives right now. But honestly, I don't think that he cares about anything more than the baby at the moment. So that's a huge relief, because I really didn't want to get caught up in some sort of weird family drama. Anyway, speaking of family, my parents are flying out to meet us in the next few days. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that whatever my in-laws have to try, they just wait it out until my parents are here, because I don't want them to trouble my dad. He already has a lot of problems with health that he has to deal with. This is the last thing that he would need when he's coming over to meet his grandchild. So I hope they can stay away. Update 2. So my parents are finally here. They landed last evening and they're going to be staying with us for the next couple of days. I'm really grateful for it, because I could really use the extra pair of hands with my baby. I'm on maternity leave right now, but my husband still has to work from home, so he can't help out as much as he would like to. So my mom's helping me out, and thankfully, whatever drama my in-laws have to create, they have restricted themselves to online means for now. So my dad is not getting in trouble. For everyone who's asking, he has a lot of heart problems. It's been an issue for a couple of years. And we really don't like stressing him out. And it's very easy to stress him out, especially when it has anything to do with me. We haven't even told him anything about the whole situation with my in-laws. because I know that my dad will be furious if he finds out how my in-laws refuse to drive me to the hospital. And like I said, we really don't want him sweating this. So for the next couple of days, for as long as he's here, we are not going to talk about any of that. But that doesn't mean that my in-laws have refrained from creating drama. They are still going strong. Like I said, they are restricting themselves to online means. They've created a bunch of burner profiles on social media, and they are using those to contact us, tell us how we're making a mistake, and say that they had their reasons to stay at the lunch instead of driving me to the hospital, and that I shouldn't hold that against them because at the end of the day, it's not like they did something bad to their grandkid or something. I don't even understand why they just won't get the point. That it's not about them having done something bad, it's about them not sticking to what they had committed to. They had been very inconsiderate and selfish, and whatever reasons they had, I really didn't care about it. Because this was important to me, and they should have been important to them as well if they cared about their grandchild so much. From the looks of it, it seems like they want to care about their grandchild right now because he's in this world. But they couldn't care less about the way he was brought into it, not about the person who brought him into it either. They had promised us that they would be there for me if my husband happened to be unavailable at the time that I went into labor. And they had every opportunity to be there for me, but they actively chose not to do so. And that's unforgivable. So Nate and I really don't care what sort of reasons they have for any of this. It just doesn't matter. No reason is going to excuse this, and I'm going to keep them away from my family for as long as I need to. If that makes me the bad guy, or if that makes me somebody who's overreacting, then fine, so be it. But right now, I know that I don't need them around. Nate doesn't want them around, and my parents also don't want them around. I'm just lucky that they haven't asked about it yet, but if they do, I'm just going to make up something. Anyway, I'm just glad that they are not showing up in person because that's really the last thing that I want. I think Nate and I have enough on our plate already without having them add to it. Update 3. Okay, so my parents were here for a week, but they had to fly back yesterday because they have their own work and life as well. But it was really nice to have them here, even if it was just for a week. They told us that they are going to try and visit by the end of the month again, so I'm looking forward to that. It was nice to have my mom helping me out, but now that she's gone, Nate has promised me that he's going to try and cut down on his work a little so he can help me out. Thankfully, we have been very diligent with our savings for the past couple of years, so we can afford to be a little laid back right now. Things are going well for us. His family hasn't contacted us in a while. They keep trying to reach out to us initially, like I had said. But for the past couple of days, I guess they took the hint and decided to leave us alone. And as I had expected, my parents did ask me about my in-laws and why they were not visiting, because they had found it really confusing. I considered telling my dad the truth, but in the end, I just told him that they were out on vacation at the moment and they were going to be back later. He found it a little weird, but he didn't question it. So we got off easy. But when I said the same thing to my mom, she saw through my lies pretty easily, and she told me she knew that something must have happened and that's why they were not coming over. Because given how they are always talking about family and family values and keeping everyone together and all that stuff, she said that she found it hard to believe that people like that had chosen to stay on vacation rather than come back home to see their grandchild. And of course, there was no hiding it from her, so I told her the truth. She was just as surprised as I had been, and she told me that I had made the right call by not telling my dad because he definitely would have freaked out and given my in-laws a piece of his mind. And that would have just stressed him out even more. So it was probably better not to give him a reason at all. As for our reaction to the whole thing, she told us that we had done exactly the right thing. She told me that if she had had the opportunities that they had had, then she definitely would have made sure that she was there for my daughter-in-law's delivery, especially when we had specifically asked him to be there for us. And they had agreed to it. In spite of that, they couldn't be bothered to show up just because they were having lunch with Lily's boyfriend, as if that was more important than anything else in the world. It was just a lunch. They could have just excused themselves and come over to my aid, but clearly I was not a priority for them. My mom was actually pretty disappointed that she couldn't have been here for me, but I told her that it was completely fine because I knew that she had to take care of my dad and that it was not possible for them to fly out here, especially when they didn't even know when my due date was going to be. They had plans of coming over around the time of my due date, but unfortunately, I gave birth earlier, so it wasn't possible for them. And I don't blame them at all. This is just how life works. But it was not the same for my in-laws. They had a chance and they believed it. And now they're going to have to face the consequences. I was feeling a bit weird about the fact that I hadn't even given them a chance to explain because they kept insisting in their messages that they had their reasons. But it was my mom who convinced me that I didn't need to feel guilty about any of that. Because at the end of the day, they hadn't been there for me, and that was that. That was all I needed to know. She's the one who told me that no matter what reasons they could possibly have had, it didn't matter because we were already pretty sure that they couldn't have been serious reasons because otherwise we would have known. And if they were not anything serious, then they were just not excuses. It was as simple as that. So that's what I'm choosing to go by. And I'm definitely not engaging with them right now. Update 4. Okay, so it's been 2 weeks and we had pretty much forgotten about the whole thing with my in-laws. We were completely focused on our son and this new lifestyle, so we really didn't have time to sit and think about them. We had almost moved on from the thing, but then they turned up today. At around 9 in the morning, literally while we were in the middle of breakfast, they started ringing the doorbell incessantly. And when we checked, it was the 3 of them standing outside with a bunch of gifts and bouquets and balloons. I don't know what they were expecting. They probably thought that if they showed up with their gifts and stuff, we were going to melt and let them in. But I remembered everything, and so did Nate. So we opened the door and told them that we didn't need any of this, and we would just appreciate it if they just left us alone. When they had the chance to help us and be nice to us, they blew it. So now we didn't need all this pretense. And for some reason, his mom started speaking to me like people speak to little kids, cajoling and stuff. She told me that she knew that I was mad and that I had every right to be, but they were only human and everyone made mistakes. So they were allowed one mistake and we had all already wasted a lot of time being mad at each other, so it was better for us to just try and move on from whatever had happened, because that was what was going to be good for their grandson in the long run. Her tone was very condescending and I actually didn't know what to say because I was so surprised. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that since I was 5 years old, and I needed to be spoken to like a toddler. So Nate told her to cut it out because we were not at daycare and she was not my babysitter. So she didn't need to speak to me like that in that tone because it was just really weird. And he also told her that whatever was good for our son, we were a better fit to decide that as the parents. They had lost the right to call themselves the grandparents the day that they refused to drive me to the hospital. So now all this was pointless. And his parents started bickering with him, saying that we were taking this way too far now and that it had already been a few weeks, so we should have just forgiven them by now and moved on. But clearly we just wanted to drag it out and keep making them feel like they had committed a sin or something, when in reality it wasn't even that big of a deal. They said that not only were we overreacting, we were also not even being considerate of our son, because purposely depriving a child of their grandparents and aunt's love out of nothing but spite It's just really petty behavior. That was the point at which I snapped and told them that we do not even owe them an answer for that. And I said that they needed to get out of here, or else I really would be calling the cops on them, and then they would be sorry about everything. I also informed them that my child was not going to be deprived of anyone's love. Our love and affection were going to be enough for him. And clearly, they didn't value him enough when he was being born, so we didn't need them to stick around anymore, especially considering the fact that they never even thought it was possible to apologize to me. And all they have done until now is accuse me of snitching and overreacting and all that. They were shocked because I was yelling at them. I'm usually not one to start screaming at people, but I had just had it with them because they were really getting on my nerves now. As if it was not bad enough that they had refused to hold up their promise to me, they still have the audacity to keep showing up and trying to make me feel like the bad guy. And seeing how worked up I was getting, Nate also told them to leave, or else we would be forced to call the cops, and we really didn't want to do that. Everything got a bit loud and heated, and because of that, my son woke up and I decided to attend to him in the crib. Thankfully, he was in the living room, not too far away, so I could still hear everything that was going on. Nate's parents and sister were trying to reason with him, and of course, the only way they could think of doing that was by making me the bad guy here. They said that I was pregnant, so I was obviously hormonal and emotional, and he should keep his head on straight in the situation and try to think about things from their perspective as well. They just did not want to seem rude and disrespectful to Lily's boyfriend, whom they were meeting for the first time ever. And that was the only reason why they had missed the birth. And they insisted that later on they had just forgotten about it, as if we were going to buy any of that. You don't just forget that your daughter-in-law is giving birth and your first grandchild is about to be born. And it is very unlikely that all three of them had forgotten at the same time. So they skipped it on purpose, and that was the fact of the matter. They kept trying to argue, and Nate kept trying to drive them away until finally he took out his phone and said that he was going to call the cops because he was just sick and tired of them. When he did that, that was finally when they left, cursing at him, telling him that he was an ungrateful son and that they were never going to forgive him for this. But he couldn't care less. After they left, he just made a beeline for me and the baby, and we spent the rest of the afternoon in silence because we had had enough activity for the day. Right now, he's playing with the baby, and I'm typing this out, and we have spoken about what we're going to do the next time that they decide to show up. We're just going to call the cops, plain and simple, because they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. The only reason we had not called the cops today right off the bat was because we did not want to create a scene. We live in a nice neighborhood. Cops are not very common here, so we wanted to maintain our dignity, but screw that. I'm just so done with them that I can't even bring myself to think about them anymore. I guess I'll be taking a couple of days off from posting here because I just really need to take a break now. But thank you, everyone who has continued to comment and support me. It really means a great deal to us. Update 5. Hi, so it's been 3 weeks since my last update, and my family and I are doing really well. My mom's back here along with my dad, and she's going to be helping me out for the next week or so. We're also looking for a nanny because in a couple of months I'll have to go back to work as well. I'm really happy to have her because with her I can also discuss everything that has happened with my in-laws. Nate doesn't really want to talk about it, and understandably so, because he's quite embarrassed of the way his family has behaved. They sent us an email a couple of days ago, probably last week, and of course they did not bother to apologize, but they did provide an explanation as to why they had chosen to have lunch that day instead of coming to me. So apparently this guy that Lily is dating, he's extremely rich. And I'm talking millionaire rich because he's the eldest son of a really successful industrialist. And they said this lunch was very important for them because they wanted him to have a good first impression of them. He and Lily have been getting pretty serious, and they are thinking about getting married next year. They've already been together for 6 months and they plan on being married by the time they've completed 2 years together. So, of course, this was a very important discussion to have, and they couldn't have delayed it because had it been some normal guy, they could have easily left in the middle of lunch so they could come to me. But this was an extremely wealthy guy that we were talking about. So naturally, they couldn't help but be extremely shallow as well. I don't know why. I guess they really thought that this was going to be the explanation that we wanted to hear, and we would instantly forgive him. But if anything, it just made me feel really disgusted with them. Because of all the talk about family being important, family values and all that, this is clearly not what they live by. Because if they actually valued their family, they would have been there for me. They would have been there for their son's partner, for their future grandchild, but they chose money. They chose to impress some guy they had just met over me. So all that talk about family values, it's obviously just rubbish. They don't actually believe in it. They just say all that crap to make themselves appear better. Anyway, I really don't want to talk about them anymore. I have spoken to my dad as well. We finally told him the truth because he was asking about them. And there was no way that we could lie to him this time as well. Surprisingly, he was pretty laid back about it and said that since we had already dealt with them, he didn't feel the need to engage with them anymore. He also told me that he was really proud of me for standing up for himself and cutting toxic people out of my life, regardless of whether they were family or whatever. And he seems extremely fond of my husband, even more than he used to be before, which I didn't even think was possible. But I guess the fact that Nate stood up against his own family for my sake just makes him even more endearing, and I'm glad to see that my father and his son-in-law are bonding so well. Everyone's happy, everyone's well, and this is exactly what I wanted since the beginning. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.